Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff, Needell and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. It was a pretty jammed weekend of motorsport all over the world, but the real action, I think, the real entertainment was from Le Mans with Moto GP. Yeah. So going to catch up with that. We're going to go to Portugal for WEC. There were GTs at Brands Hatch.
All these E's, RCs.
WRC.
Right. Too many letters for you. You can't handle it, can you?
I'm just a bit dyslexic. The USA, of course, it was packed in the USA. IndyCar, IndyNxt, with a few Brits in that, not mentioning as well Jamie Chadwick, and NASCAR, which was very controversial. And then also there was, we can't forget, Tiff, there was the electric Extreme E up in Scotland.
Oh, no.
Well.
Yeah, what is it? It was in Glenmuckloch.
I'm glad you said that, not me. Just outside, I prefer to say just outside of Glasgow.
It looked very mucky. We'll get to that at the end of the show.
We'll get to that at the end. Let's start off. Have you got any news this weekend? Any gossip? Any news?
No, all been very quiet on the Formula One front. Nothing really happening apart from everyone scratching their heads as to how Red Bull's doing it so well, and nobody seemed to be able to. They're all talking about the anti-dive and anti-squat, and there's so many theories now as to what Red Bull have done so well. So it's fascinating to see if anyone can turn on their cars halfway through the season, which I somehow doubt.
I don't think they will. Mercedes, yeah, I don't think so. No, I don't think so at all. It's just such a massive difference, half a second or even more than that. You can't find that just by magically making a few little tweaks and changes. And isn't it weird that we haven't even had a European race? But yet, 7 years ago today, it was Barcelona. Can you remember who had their maiden victory 7 years ago this day?
7 years ago?
7 years
maiden victory?
Yep.
Well, it must have been Max, becoming 7 years ago.
It was in 2016. He was the youngest ever, 18 years old, 228 days. And it was his debut for Red Bull, believe it or not, because he did a season. Remember this, you forget all this thing.
It was Toro Rosso, yeah.
Exactly. He did a season before with Toro Rosso. Then he had a few races in the 2016 season with Toro Rosso. And then he replaced, who did he replace at Toro Rosso?
Must have been... Gasly.
Kvyat. Daniel Kvyat.
Kvyat.
Yeah.
Kvyat. Wow.
Yes. Yeah, so Kvyat was downgraded to Toro Rosso. Max had his debut, and then he got lucky, and I don't
I remember that was a bit of a lucky win, wasn't it?
It was lucky. A win's a win. A win's a win.
I agree.
But Mercedes, Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton crashed into each other, if you remember that. They had the crash. They had that incident.
Yeah. And then Ricciardo. Wow, Ricciardo was the team leader.
He was indeed. He was the dominant. He was the team leader, and he was on a different strategy to Max. Ricciardo was on a 2-stop strategy, and Max on a 3-stop strategy, or one of them, whichever way around it was.
Vice versa.
And Max's strategy was the successful one. So. Win's a win in my book.
Win's a win.
Well, the great thing is, Max hasn't gone on to be conceited or arrogant.
Don't start. Don't you start.
He's gone on to be super humble.
I've met him, and he's a lovely bloke. I admit some of his racecraft doesn't always sit with me happily, but he's a nice bloke when he's on his own having a chat in an interview I did in Monaco. So there you go.
So, there's a little bit more Max trivia for you, because this is quite interesting as well. His first, according to Wikipedia anyway, his first ever racing car experience was in October at Pembrey Circuit. Now, you and I have filmed at Pembrey before. It's on the Carmarthenshire coast in South Wales. October in a single-seater racing car. That was his first ever experience back in 2013.
Quite a few teams do go down there because it's got no noise limits. It's a popular test track in the winters at Pembrey. It's a good little track, actually, quite challenging. Yeah. You ever raced there or not? No,
never didn't race there, but I've been around sideways with you.
We filmed there many times.
Yeah. Okay, let's. It is a good little track, and good for Max. I'm glad he's so humble and relaxed now.
Don't start again.
Old days.
What is it? What's the phrase for when you give something nice and then you pull the carpet? There's some word for that.
I think it's called a shit. I think it's called a shit sandwich, Tiff. I think we're allowed to swear on this podcast now. We don't care. we don't get many viewers anyway. But thank you for the viewers that we do get. Let's go to where all the real action was in MotoGP at Le Mans. How did that Le Mans circuit work with the motorbikes?
Well, funny enough, it works really well with bikes. I think I said last week when I was saying looking ahead to MotoGP at Le Mans, but not the Le Mans circuit, this horrible go-kart track, which Formula One cars tried in 1967 or something and never went back again. And I've raced there in those Euro NASCAR. And it's a horrible circuit in a car because it's got so many, it's like a hairpin, it's got 3 chicanes and 5 hairpins. And the only really fast corner is the beginning of the high-speed S. But for bikes, it works so well. Because it's narrow and the edge of the track is straight to the gravel traps or onto the grass, so there's no running wide and no track limits because you're in the gravel. And of course, it gets a huge crowd in the middle of Le Mans, wonderful place to go. Apparently, they have free camping. The organisers run it really well. There's a massive crowd there.
Brilliant.
So great stadium feel. And actually, contrast, I often say with Silverstone, the MotoGPs, they look lost at Silverstone because these tiny little machines, only 18 or 20 of them. And you're so far away in some of these modern grandstands, aren't you, with all the runoff in front of you? They look sort of lost, little tiny things going round. But at Le Mans, because it all closes in on you and the track's so tight, it produced just non-stop action, whether it's Moto2, Moto3, MotoGP. And of course, they now start the sprint race on the Saturday to get all the beer drinkers going and get it all up. And
but the sprint race on the Saturday is a great idea, but not as good as the free camping. What brilliant idea! I've never heard that before. It's great way to get a big crowd.
Yeah, get them in there. They earn their money on the beer. Yeah, I think So Le Mans, a great name, a lovely town and city to go to. If it's a city, or whatever it is, but it's a wonderful part of France to visit anyway.
Is that the best known town, city, place in the world for motorsport? Indianapolis, I guess, that's probably better.
Yeah, Indianapolis, Le Mans, and
the Daytona.
It's the triple crown. Yeah. So in the sprint race with it was all elbows out, the usual sprint race. So these amazing 10 lap or 12 lap runs that they're now risking their lives to get some half points. And Jorge Martin from Spain won that sprint race on a Pramac Ducati, one of the satellite teams. But one of the greatest thing about it was that Marquez was back, having injured himself yet again in a foolhardy overtaking manoeuvre in Portugal. Well, the second round of the year, wasn't it? And he plonked his Honda that nobody else could ride fast. He's got a new chassis. They've got a Kalle chassis, which is a manufacturer that makes chassis. I'm not sure how much you'll have to build on a MotoGP bike. It must be pretty free. And he qualified at second, and he was in the battle up the front, elbows out as only Marquez could do, but he was obviously just fighting harder than the bike could go. The Ducati is still really dominating. Francesco Bagnaia, the champion, he was on pole. He led early on, when he faded away to third as this Jorge Martin came through to win. The KTM boys, every sprint race is full of the KTM duo of Jack Miller and Brad Binder just nailing. Binder does. He's amazing. This time he actually failed on his start. Binder dropped back instead of going forwards. But I think Jack.
But he's normally amazing at starting, isn't he?
Yeah, but and he got pushed wide down at the first hairpin at the bottom of the hill. Jack Miller, I think, was leading for a while, but he fell off, tried to battle it, and Marquez faded to fifth. Fabio Quartararo was having a miserable time. The French hero's home Grand Prix world champion, 2 years ago, whatever it was. This Yamaha's just still not working. He fell off, crashed out. So it was all pretty amazing stuff. But I got where Binder came up to second. Binder got second. Sorry, I was getting confused. He came back through, didn't he? Got to second.
Yeah, he did.
From 10th on the grid. So amazing sprint race to entertain them. And the Grand Prix was just like a sprint race, pretty much, for the whole of the Grand Prix. There wasn't much difference. This time, Marquez led, got the whole shot off the start. He led for a while, then Miller got by, Miller led. And then Marco Bezzecchi in the Valentino Rossi, the VR46 satellite Ducati team, he came to the front and actually then pretty much dominated. Once he got to the front, he pinned it, as they say, pinned it, and got a gap that he held right to the end. But the battle behind was just raging non-stop. Marquez eventually fell off, trying to hold. He just lost second place to Jorge Martin that came through again in the Ducati. And he was just trying to stay with him, and down he went. There was one amazing shunt, which I've forgotten to put all the names down. I think Alex Espargaro was involved. But there was one rider coming out of the chicane, and he lost it on the right, the first Dunlop chicane. And he was holding it up on his knee and his elbow, and you could see the sparks coming off his elbow protector.
Unbelievable.
It was such a shame because he was slowing down while he was just trying to get it to stand up again. And I think it was then Espargaro that was blinded because he was following another bike. ran into him because he was going so slow and took them both out in a scary moment.
Did he have a tank slapper coming out of the chicane? Because you do get them in the bikes, don't you?
I think the front goes down. It wasn't a high side. It was a low side. So it was the front folding.
Okay.
Which they then do these amazing, hold it up on the knee and the elbow, gradually try to. But it was the sparks coming off his elbow.
These boys are crazy. Crazy in a nice way.
Miller dumped it as well. Miller went down while still trying to say. So it was an amazing thing because it was the two Pramac Ducatis then with Marquez dropping down. Johan Zarco, the French rider. So French had a man on the podium. He came through to follow his teammate home. So it was a Ducati 1, 2, 3 in the end, but all satellite teams. I don't know who was the first factory rider. It was about 6th or 7th. It was an incredible fourth.
I think that's bloody brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant that the satellite teams can compete against the factory teams. Absolutely brilliant.
That's why you need privateers in Formula One with last year.
You would never get that in Formula One, Tiff. Not now.
We used to.
Yeah, I know you did. Hesketh.
But there's another great story. Augusto Fernandez, last year's Moto2 champion. He's on a satellite KTM, same as Miller and Binder. And he came up to 4th from 12th. So he had a really good... So here's a young kid, on a satellite bike coming through. But yeah, it was just entertaining all the way. And of course, I think the commentary's great. Again, all the shouty commentators I complain about. You're getting too old. Listen to the MotoGP boy. He's forgotten his name. Sorry, names always have Susie's boy. And he shouts a bit, but then he drops down, and when it's exciting, he doesn't do this wall-to-wall shouting. And the expert, the analysts, and Susie, of course, leading the team, the whole package of MotoGP, both on off track, is just built for entertainment, and it didn't disappoint last weekend.
Brilliant. Was it Nick Harris, the commentator?
Yeah, possibly. I've forgotten his name. Yeah, good stuff. He does shouty, but then only when needed, and that's what it should be, not wall to wall.
Moto2 years of age. Bloody hell! You give him a run for his money.
Oh, is he? I don't know. If you've got the right man in your research, you back on Wiki, are you again?
Yeah, Nick Harris. That looked like him.
I don't know. I hear his voice. I've never met the man.
Well, big shout out to Nick Harris if it is you. Big shout out to you.
Yeah, drama continued. Well, of course, the drama started. They start with Moto3, then Moto2, then MotoGP, the way it goes in the day. But Moto2 was an awful story for Sam Lowes, the British rider who'd won at Jerez and who's pole at Le Mans, so he's on the crest of a new wave. And I'm coming back. I'm going to win the championship. I think he's won it before. But on the second lap, or at the beginning of the second lap, he dropped it, braking for the first chicane. It was horrible, really fast. They call it turn 1 and 2. I'd call it just one turn, the approach to the Dunlop left-right chicane. And of course, they're leaning over while they have to start braking. So, of course, then with the tyres maybe not fully up to temperature, I mean, he couldn't understand the commentators because just the front folded under him, and he was just sliding off the road. So his pole had a bad start. He was running 3rd at the end of that first lap. But luckily for him, or sort of luckily, not really in the end, there was a horrendous 3-bike shunt, I think still on that same second lap, down at the hairpin at the bottom as they dive down towards the Dunlop chicane for the Formula Ones for the World Sports Cars. But yeah, really, it was a rider dropped it, then 2 riders went over the bike on the ground. That terrified. They're all catapulting, cartwheeling through the air. So they red flagged it, which meant that if they could get his bike fixed, Sam Lowes could be back on pole position because it was a complete restart. They got the bike back into the garage. It was one of those, they had a 3-minute warning. 3 minutes, pit entry closes, pit exit closes.
And that feels like about 30 seconds, doesn't it? Yeah. It's horrid when it's a Belgian against the clock.
Belgian team, VDS, Mark VDS, the Belgian. And these Belgian boys, they were just all over this tiny little bike. And they got him out, and he was like 3 seconds short, which meant he then had to start for the pit lane. He still got to start, but now the back of the field. He came through to finish 15th, I think it was, but I'm sure the bike wasn't working properly. And that allowed his teammate, Tony Arbolino. Phone, I don't want the phone ringing. We'll just turn that off.
Where's the wife? Where's the wife when you need her?
Well, she might be now panicking around, but she'll have to work that out. I can't have the phone interrupting our guests listening. So Tony Arbolino then went to the front and led virtually all the way. being chased by Pedro Acosta, his teammate, but Acosta dumped it. Another one. Down he went.
I know.
It's all these hairpins, these long hairpins where they're trying to brake and leave. And as soon as you have a little bit too much front brake on, down the front folds. They were equal on points before this round. So now Arbolino went on to win. He's now 25 points ahead of Acosta in the championship. Jake Dixon, again, not really...
Not doing anything,
He qualified 8th, finished 5th. I'll just let it ring for a little bit. And maybe, oh, yes, it's been answered this time. Good. Well done. Partner, secretary, good job. So Jake, well, he was 8th, and he usually charges forward. He's famous for coming strongly at the end of races, but he got back to 5th, so not the best of races. Our other British runner, Rory Skinner, went from 26th and into the gravel trap. So not a good day for the Brits, really, and especially not for Sam Lowes, who was absolutely gutted afterwards. And also not a good day for the Brits in Moto 3. Our Vision Track boys, Scott Ogden and Josh Watley. Scott had this fantastic 3rd place, which was dropped to 5th under a penalty was given in the rain in not Argentina, the country, Chile, Uruguay, somewhere like that, middle of South America. But yeah, because he had a good run. I think he was at the bottom of the top 10 at Jerez, and we thought he's getting there. But then he qualified badly. He always seems to all the testing, the untimed practices that are timed. He's sort of up midfield. But then he doesn't qualify well, and he's not that good on opening laps. I mean, he dropped from, I don't know where he was on the grid, but he dropped from 20th down to 23rd. So Scott needs a reset. And last year, of course, he had a good mid-season, and then he had a few crashes and lost the face. So it's a shame. The Vision Track boys not really as where we hope them to be. But out front, Spain's Daniel Holgado increased his championship lead with a pretty dominant win. Wasn't all that much overtaking. Still a bit for the little motor. There's a pack of 8 that all finished within 2 seconds of each other at the end of the race. Very, very close, but with the nature of that track, not as much overtaking, not the big slipstreaming and overtakes that you get at other bigger circuits. But entertaining. But no joy in Moto 3 or 2 for the Brits.
Good stuff. What about WRC?
RC got it right this time.
Yeah, my notes said WEC, so I got to sack our researcher. So WRC in Portugal.
Yeah, a tame rally, a very tame. Unfortunately, on day one, there was only 8 cars in the top class, so only 8 in the race, as it were, and we lost 3 on the first day. Pretty much, Katsuta in one of the Toyotas broke down, and then Elfyn Evans had an awful shunt, huge high speed shunt. And they go to these trees, and you're after Craig Breen's, which was a pole coming through the window. You're just sort of terrified every time they
Stop it!
I know.
I can't even think about it. And when you see, we say it every week, these guys are some of the best drivers in the world. When you see them driving at full chat on those roads with trees, and you hear
well, I hate to be a poo-pooer, but I think like Group B was slowed down after those awful accidents. I think they're going to have to slow them down a bit.
But there's something to be said about racing. We've all had a hire car where it's underpowered, but it just, when you drive it on some country roads or something, it just feels so rewarding. There's something about driving an underpowered car, and I'm not saying they need to be underpowered, but just cut a bit of that power maybe.
But it's the grip they've got. I don't know how you slow them. They're just the speed they go through these corners is just, it's wonderful to watch, when they go by, but they've gone in a flash. What have I just seen?
When they all 4 wheels go off the ground and they're already sideways, ready for the next corner.
The skills are out of this world.
It wasn't Portimao, by the way, the WRC. I said WRC was at Portimao. It wasn't. It was in Portugal, but it was Forest in Portugal. I don't know where it was.
Yes. Yeah.
So it wasn't a circuit.
No. I didn't even notice you'd said that. Got that. Anyway. The demise of his teammates left the surviving Toyota Kalle Rovanperä, the reigning champion, who's had a bit of an off season. He's had so many rallies where he's had to be the road sweeper at the front and hasn't managed to recover. Anyway, he dominated the rest of the rally and went out for quite an easy win. The Hyundais, who are usually the ones that break down and cause problems, they had a nice, all 3 of them finished in 2nd, 3rd and 5th, with Sordo 2nd from Escapacalapi. Thierry Neuville was 5th, but he had no turbo at the last day, I think. And the only surviving Ford Octanek was 4th, but he had all sorts of punctures and handling problems after his teammate Pierre-Louis Loubet, or Louet, as I'm trying to think. I don't know if anyone's heard my Louet. Nobody's commented. Can you comment below?
Anyone
else? Exactly. Does anybody else call Pierre-Louis Loubet. Yeah, all right. Don't go on too long. But there was a fantastic battle for 6th overall now, because we're talking the surviving rally cars up front, between Britain's Gus Greensmith, who won the WRC2 by 1.2 seconds from Oliver Solberg, both in Skoda. Incredible, but it was Solberg catching up again. To be fair, Gus was pretty much given it, because Solberg had a half a minute lead at the end of day 2 or 3, whichever was the penultimate day. And after the end of the spectator stage, having finished the spectator stage, gone through the checkered flag ending, and to go back to the timing section, decided, perhaps something he inherited from his father, Petter, to do some donuts. To which the crowd were on their feet, cheering, whooping, applauding, but to which the FIA stewards said, according to rule A651B2, any sort of donuts, and you will have a 1 minute penalty, young Solberg.
Oh, what a gutter!
So I did tweet. I think a lot of Colin McRae's rallies will now have to be. We go back now, don't we? Change history now a lot, and I think a lot of McRae's wins will now have to be ruled out of the rule book of all the donuts he did all the time. So anyway, Solberg then started that.
How do you feel about that rule? Stage. Because I'm a bit of a stickler. I think rules are rules, but that one sounds bloody ridiculous.
Oh, I know. He might have endangered someone, might have endangered everybody.
There is a certain person I know, I won't mention any names, but at Thruxton he does this ride thing, and then he comes back into this car park, and there's people everywhere, cars everywhere.
Does he?
And occasionally he'll come in, and this guy will just do donuts in this little tiny car park compound. I know it's endangering people everywhere. It sounds really dangerous, but he's got it under control. It's not too bad.
Anyway, it was a fantastic comeback, Oliver. He caught up virtually 30 seconds in the 4 stages. Gus had power steering problems on his Skoda, so it was very tense. 1.2 seconds after 3 or 4 days. So yes, and then still in Europe before we go off to America. I forgot to mention this last week. I never look at their calendar. Because maybe this is why I never look at their calendar, because it was a round of the Fanatec GT World Challenge powered by AWS Sprint Cup. Came to Brands Hatch. This used to be Blancpain, which used to call it Blancpain.
Which circuit? Brands Hatch?
Brands Grand Prix, Brands Long Circuit. And there's a huge crowd there. I mean, it's such a great circuit. Brands, the locals love to go there. Of course, Valentino Rossi was racing an Audi. So he's always a bit of an attraction for this new Fanatec GT World Challenge powered by AWS Sprint Cup. There were wins for Mercedes and Audi. In fact, Rossi had a 14th and a 2nd place in his BMW.
Wow.
So he was on the podium the second race. Second race was Audi, BMW. The first race was Mercedes, Audi, BMW. So...
well, I've always said Brands is one of the best places to go watch, so good to hear this big crowd. Where do you think the best place to watch is? Let us know in the comments below. Best circuit to watch motor racing?
There's only one place. I used to cling to the fence for the Race of Champions and also the World Sports Cars, the BOAC 1000, always on the exit of Clearways. No, so you can see across. So you see them coming down the South Bank and disappearing to the Grand Prix circuit. Then you see them reappearing. So you get two pits. That's the place. Up the fence, Clearways.
Yeah, but I quite like just the normal grandstand where you see paddock, and then you can see Graham Hill, and you can see you can see the straight, so you can see quite a lot there as well. But
couldn't afford a grandstand when I was a child. Couldn't afford grandstands. I was just a cling to the fence. We used to get there at 6 o'clock in the morning to get on the fence.
Amazing, Tiff. Absolutely. A true motorsport enthusiast. Amazing.
Thank you. Over to the US of A.
There's loads going on over there. Let's start with NASCAR or IndyCar? IndyCar.
Oh, IndyCar.
NASCAR is quite controversial.
We'll leave that to the last, the American quartet of American big races. IndyCar, well, it was a runaway win for Alex Palou. And I've complained a bit on Twitter about it's never that exciting for some reason on the IndyCar road course. Because it always ends up being a tyre strategy, fuel strategy. And if you pick the wrong tyres, you're then trying to get to the next fuel stop so you can not stop 3 times instead of 2, and you're running around in rubbish rubber. But then everybody else seems to say, no, that's brilliant. That's what it should be like, because nobody knows what's going to happen, because it's a tyre lottery, which the bigger teams tend to be getting the hang of more than others. So you have to run the reds and you have to run sticker reds. That's the alternate softer tyre. You have to run the black tyres. The Chip Ganassi team just got it nailed with Alex Palou. It was always one of the front runners, and he cruised to a win. Arrow McLaren, all the big teams came to the fore. They had an amazing. They finished second, third, and fifth. Pato Award second, Alexander Rossi third, and Felix Rosenqvist fifth. Well, it was some close racing, but just not enough racing because the pack gets spread out in their different strategies all going on. But the story of the weekend really was perhaps the return of Rahal Letterman's team, who have been at the back of the grid, and so slow to be embarrassed. And they always go quite well at this road course. And Christian Lundgaard, this young Danish kid, he's about 21 now. He's put it on pole position. Jack Harvey, Britain's leading one, was fourth on the grid. And Graham Rahal, team boss, was eighth on the grid. So it's amazing come to the fore. And Lundgaard led for a while, but Palou's strategy just left him standing. And Lundgaard dropped to fourth at the end of the race. Jack Harvey was running top 10 early on, but pitted quite early for his first change. And then whilst we were at a commercial break, I saw Harvey coming into the pits for another set of tyres too soon. So don't know what went wrong, but he ended up 20th. And Graham Rahal ended up 10th. So not the best results, but at least a return of speed for Rahal Letterman team. Our other British boy, Eilot, was no way qualified low and ran low. Yeah. He's had some quite good runs recently, but he didn't seem to have the pace.
Well, he's normally very solid. He's normally up there, isn't he, Callum? But he didn't. Yeah. He wasn't on it at all.
So I'm not sure about his tyre strategies. The Twitter people argued against me, told me I was wrong. I suggested that they should all start the race on a new set of sticker reds. Because apparently you have to run a set of sticker reds sometime during the race. And then at least the first half hour, you'd have everybody racing everybody. And to the people not sure about tyre strategies in the grandstands, would have a close race because everyone's very close, very short circuit and time's very tight. But I was told I was wrong, that would take strategy out of it all.
Twitter is funny, isn't it? I did put something on Twitter on the weekend because I deleted it because I don't want to be negative, but a journalist called Theo, someone or other from the BBC, met with the Ferrari boss talking about electric engines. So we're talking road cars here, and he referred to Ferrari as making some of the most incredible V8 and V10 internal combustion engines for road cars. And you look at his bio on Twitter, and it says he likes sport and cars. How can you put Ferrari down, other than their Formula One cars, as V10s? And I thought, I don't want to be negative. So I deleted it. But Twitter is very much like that, isn't it? And everybody, of course, is an armchair expert. No, Tiff, you're wrong. But it's good to have an opinion.
I've probably got some more now.
But it is the comment. I do like having people's opinions, and I do, and you can learn a lot from Twitter. And if you think something is, but not everybody is an expert. Not everybody is the expert they believe they are often.
So when Tom Gaymore, the British commentator, he does it when it goes to adverts. He was all anti-him. He says, no, Tiff, that would be wrong, that would be boring, that would be dull. But the trouble is it creates, like Formula One has its DRS trains. When you get a slow car that's quick in a straight line, and blocks every back. So the alternative tyre, you have a black tyre. What's the black tyre? The first one they call it anyway. The hard tyre. You have a hard tyre train. So you'll get a guy, in the first half an hour, hard car boys will hold up the fast tired boys, blocking them and weaving. So you get these gaps.
Yeah, but that's your strategy, surely. Then it's up to you to...
Well, I don't like too much strategy, all right? I like racing.
Yeah, but then you won't have such close racing because the top teams will be gone. They'll be gone.
No, because they were so the top team. Rahal Letterman were right in amongst the mix on time.
Because of strategy.
No, because they all ran sticker reds to qualify, right? But when it came to the race, they all Rahal was knocked off at the first corner, which didn't help. But when it came to the race, they all faded because the big teams had sorted their task. I mean...
Okay, what do you do in a relay race? You've got Usain Bolt, you've got the 100-meter relay race. Do you put Usain Bolt first or do you put him last? So some teams put their fastest runner first, some put them last. So why don't you let the teams do their own strategy?
I'm not going to get into this. I'm right, you're wrong. I just think it would be a better spectacle. It almost in Formula One, I'd like them all to start at the same time. But they tend to nowadays. The front 10 usually start at the same time. But actually, the difference between the soft and medium in Formula One isn't as big as it is in in IndyCar. The difference between the reds and the blacks is quite large. So anyway, let's move on. I've said my point. Let's move on to IndyNxt, which is quite. Let's move on. Did you get where I did that? Move
Very
on.
good. IndyNxt. NXT. So we've quite a few British contingency over NXT.
Yeah, two or three.
The highest profile, of course, is Jamie Chadwick.
Jamie's still not on the pace. She talked about she just mentioned a tweet that when the qualifying tyres come in, it gets really heavy. She didn't sort of say heavy steering, but she's implying. This is the problem with females in motorsport, this lack of power steering, except in Formula One and world sports cars. Whether we should make power steering a legal requirement in all single-seater formulas to help the weaker people. Not that women are weak, but you know what I mean, less strong. And whether it is, I think this was a trouble she had when she was Euro Formula 3 or regional Formula 3 when she couldn't stay with the boys. Someone said they had to take caster off her car because the steering got too heavy. So she qualified 14th and finished 14th out of an 18-car field. But Louis Foster, her teammate in Andretti Motorsport, he was battling caught. He was starting third, I think, and tracked down the leader, Matteo Nannini, nephew of Alessandro Nannini, the famous Formula One racer. Whereas Louis is the son of Nick Foster, the famous BTCC racer. Sorry, Nick. I mean, not that Alessandro Nannini is more famous than you, Nick, but Louis caught him up and just couldn't get by him. It was a good run, but no much overtaking. But those two were head and shoulders above him.
So the Andretti car is a solid car. It's not. It's not like it's a.
I know Jamie's in with a good team. Yeah, they're one of the top teams in things. So congratulations to Louis. Commiserations to Jamie. Move on, Jamie. Next race. I'm not sure when the next one is for you, but
I think good for her to give it a go because she talk about under the spotlight. You can't hide with your co-drivers or anything like that. It's you and your team. She's with a good team. She's with a good driver within the team as well. So
actually, it'll probably more of a challenge. It'll probably be her first oval next race. There must be an oval coming up soon because they haven't done an oval this year. They don't do the Indianapolis 500 support anymore. They used to, Indy Lights, but I don't think they do that anymore. So Jamie will face her first oval race. That's an even bigger challenge.
Wow, how exciting for her, though. How exciting on this journey of hers, what she's done and achieved. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Then the other way is go across the West Coast, seaside, Laguna Seca. Amazing race, apparently. I haven't seen much stories. I've read a bit. It goes on in the middle of the night and doesn't get televised, so I probably could have found it on some internet channel. Laguna Seca for the GT prototypes, or the hybrids, as they call them in the European World Championship. Sebastian Bourdais and René van der Zande, the Dutch boy, in their Cadillac, held off a brilliant charge by Nick Tandy in the Porsche 963 that he shares with Mathieu Jaminet. I think there was a pace car. They had a 40-minute race, really, after the usual pace cars and shuffling and everything else. In fact, Alexander Sims led the restart with 40 minutes to go in the Cadillac he shares with Pippo Derani, the Brazilian. But Tandy battled through from about fifth and got within 4 seconds of Bourdais in the Cadillac. I think Renda was driving at the time, but couldn't get by. So Tandy was second in his Porsche, Sims third in the Cadillac, Acuras were fourth, BMW's fifth. So a good mix of all the manufacturers supporting the new sports car world. But,
I like it. I like it when it's you never know who's going to win. It's a bit of a mix.
And the BMW led for a while with Yellow, the British driver, running it, but failure towards the end. So all the manufacturers in there seem to be in with a chance of winning, which is all you ask for.
What else was on in America? You said there's a quartet. Is that it? In America?
NASCAR, baby.
NASCAR, of course.
With the most controversial, perhaps.
Darlington, was it? Was it Darlington?
Darlington, baby.
Yeah.
Where the amazing Carl Larson in the 5 car. He did the Formula 2 race. What's it? Indy Lights. Not in the NASCAR. I've forgotten the sponsor. Anyway, the second division NASCAR race on the Saturday. And he won that amazing race. They were clashing, touching the two of them. And on the last lap going round turn 4, heading towards the finish line, Kyle went just too quick. And the guy inside him, whose name I've forgotten, was halfway up the inside of him and maybe could nail it. And anyway, he was so close to Larson. They were both going too quick, basically. So Larson slams the wall, bounces off the wall, slams into the guy that was second, sends him spinning off. But then Larson kept going to win the race.
I shouldn't laugh, but all this reminds me so much of Talladega
Talladega, baby.
With Will Ferrell. It just really does, with the cars spinning off. And
so Larson was now looking for what they call a sweep. He was looking to win both races for the main event.
Imagine Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen doing F2 or F3 the day before F1 race. Incredible, really. Yeah.
Well, they used to, of course, in the old days.
I didn't know that.
Grand Prix days. Well, they used to race Formula 2, but not when, because Jim Clark was killed in a Formula 2 race. So, yeah, all the Grand Prix drivers on weekends off would do Formula 2 back in the Yeah. So, sadly,
did you meet Jim Clark, Tiff?
Only trying to get his autograph about 3 times. He was always too busy, but very politely too busy. I know. Anyway, so the Darlington race, it was 1.5 miles of high-speed oval. And again, you know, if you're watching, the first 2 stages were, apart from the end of the second stage when Truex spun off, were fairly single file. Everyone's changing their cars. Every time you pit, you take a bit of stagger out, add a bit of this, add a bit of tire pressure. So it always really builds up to the final stage. But Martin Truex Jr. was the classiest car in the first stage, romped to win. So you think this is going to be a boring race. But then, you know, the second stage, others started getting their cars a bit better. And Ross Chastain, the Melon Man, came to the fore, the guy that did that famous wall of death overtake to get through to the playoffs. Truex tried to get back to beat him to the line for the end of the second stage. We get points at the end of stage 1 and of stage 2. But Truex span out, so Ross Chastain won stage 2. Meanwhile, in the 5 car, Kyle Larson was gradually making his car a bit better. And his pit crew, because, you know, you have a 17-second pit crew or 15 seconds. So the difference in instead of these 2.2 stupid pit stops, the crew is so important, those pit stops. And Larson's boys got him out ahead of Chastain. So he was now leading. And, you know, clean air is really important. Even those cars look like bricks, you know, they still suffer from aero, obviously. But in the clean air...
So hang on, so they're better in clean air than they are with having a tow? Okay.
Yeah, and all the corners, because they scrub and lose a bit of downforce. So Kyle Larson is then creeping away to a dominant win. He's got it sussed. He's got a 2 or 3 second lead. When with about 13 laps to go, someone spins off. So out come the yellows. In the pits they go. So now we're coming out with 9 laps to go for a restart. And Larson chose the inside line, and Ross Chastain was on the outside line. Now, so far this year, Chastain has taken Kyle Larson out in 2 previous races, as well as taking out other drivers.
They got history.
Well, Chastain is growing a history with every other driver. Because he was the guy that punched Gregson. Remember a week ago?
Yeah.
Because his best mate Gregson was upset with him, and that's why they had a bit of tough. And it was Chastain that punched Gregson. So he's falling out with lots.
He looks an edgy character, I have to say.
I thought he jumped the start, which one of the commentators said, because when you come into the go zone, unlike Formula 1, where you do this ridiculous going 10 corners before the actual start line, when you choose to go, you can't go until you get into the 50-yard long or 75-yard long start zone. Anyway, somehow Chastain got half a car length ahead on the outside going down to turn 1. So Kyle was squeezing him towards the wall because that's what they all do, and that was a bit of a touch. But they still managed to get through almost unscathed. But right behind them, Joe Logano took Truex out on the restart. That wiped out half the field, huge shunt. But Chastain had got 2 inches ahead of Larson when the yellows go is when they then freeze the track to decide who was leading when the yellow light went on. So Chastain then had the choice. You choose which side of the track you can come for a restart. So Chastain chose the inside with Larson on the outside. We're now down to the last 3 laps of the race. And off they go. And Chastain got half a car length, and he just started squeezing Larson to the wall. And he'd been on the radio talking to his crew about the fact that Larson had touched him on the previous restart. And it was virtually, you know what I'm going to do now. You know, he touched me, he squeezed me, so you know what I'm going to do now. He almost predicts what he's going to bloody do. But he didn't just squeeze him, he just drove him into the wall. So he took himself out. I mean, he didn't leave more than, he just left the width of a car between him and the room. So, I mean, he just suicide bombed him, basically. And so it was quite funny. You have to look at the film on YouTube because Chastain's sideways on Larson's bonnet now. And so Larson just kept a full throttle. at about 130, 40 miles an hour. And he pushes him sideways from about 300 yards, 400 yards.
I shouldn't laugh. I shouldn't laugh and encourage this.
William Barham, who was actually one of Larson's teammates in the Chevrolet, he came through to a lucky win. But they interviewed Ross Chastain afterwards. He's got a big, teethy, smiley, white teeth smile, and
he's got a ginger beard, hasn't he?
Big jaw, yeah. And he was just almost laughing it off. Yeah, I went for a chance. I had a chance to win, and I was very proud. I was driving the UPS on my bonnet. Larson wouldn't comment, literally, which is very Larson's not.
So couldn't Larson have pulled out of that challenge? His car too badly damaged, and instead of pushing him for 300 yards, couldn't. Okay.
Yeah, but he was on his nose. So the Larson's team owner has had a word saying, this guy's. We all admit Chastain's got the talent. I mean, he's an incredibly quick driver. He came through to lead in stage 2, but if he keeps on driving the way he does, because of the NASCAR drivers' honour that what you do me, I'll do to you. Chastain will never win a championship because when he gets to a position, someone will tip him into the wall. And
how long's a NASCAR race typically?
About 3 hours. There's plenty of time.
So 3 hours. So virtually 3 hours of driving, and then someone takes you out with a couple of laps to go.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And when you're on for a podium at least.
Yeah. Well, Larson's never won one of the tracks he hasn't won at. So but also it would have been such a great race.
Yeah.
If he just left him 2 inches, all he wanted was 2 inches. They could both stay. Chastain may well have won the race. He was half a car length ahead. But he was so obsessed in his tiny brain. Sorry, you may have a large brain. I don't know. That he seemed to want to kill them both. That's what it looked like.
Unbelievable.
So, that's a bit of controversy. There's always controversy. It was last week. It was a punch up. This week it was that. And just to end the doubt from go.
Then the Formula E, not Formula E, Extreme E.
Yeah, go from one extreme. I've got another link here. Instead of IndyNxt, we're going from one extreme, NASCAR 160 miles an hour, to the other extreme. Beach buggies.
Just amazing. Amazing. That's what people come for. Yeah, so we had a man on the ground here. We had Phil Bradley, who
did you?
Puts all this together. So he our sort of social media guru. He was up there with Cupra, actually. So who I was, they didn't have the best of weekends, it's fair to say, but I don't think anyone had the best of weekends. And Phil very kindly has left me his own podcast, 5-minute, 39-second roundup of the event. But I didn't have time to listen to it, Phil. So we will go with
I thought you were about to give us the highlights. The man we have so last week, right? We have our man on the spot in Monaco for Formula E, and where were you? Heathrow Airport. Yeah. Now we've got our man on the spot, an Extreme E event in Glenmuckloch, and you haven't even bothered to listen to his efforts.
Well, it wasn't I haven't bothered. It was somebody saying to me, "Come on, we need to go. We need to get this recorded. We need to get this recorded." So
anyway, I have to say, I wasted very little time watching it the weekend because it was just
so bizarre. It was so bizarre.
It was on a road. It was a single track road, most of it, very little overtaken.
Well, it was an old coal mine, just outside of Glasgow.
Day one, it was all dusty. So couldn't follow because it was so dusty and there's rocks and gravel. So I didn't watch any of that after a while. And then I just zizzed a bit of the final, and it all rained, and it
lots of their wipers wouldn't even
work.
The
windscreen wipers wouldn't work. Yeah, they couldn't see. They have these slow zones when there's a car stopped or an accident, you have to go slow zone from post 3 to 6 or something. And there was one section of the track so slippy that they were all sliding down obviously a bit of a cambered road, just sliding into straw bales because they couldn't drive at any decent speed. I don't know. I don't know.
It doesn't work.
Watching it.
Sorry, it doesn't work. It's not a race series that works. It's rally. Look at WRC. That's hard enough. And at least people can go and at least people can go on the side of the roads and watch and whoop and shout. But I'm sorry. How can you have a race series that is just online or on TV where don't have fans go and watch?
Well, they were so spread out.
Child.
Yeah, they were so spread out.
To get Jim Clark's autograph, looking through the fence at 6 a.m. That's what motorsport is. Surely that's for the enthusiasts.
I want to know his podcast. How easy it was to find Glenmuckloch anyway.
Well, it wasn't a podcast. It was a voicemail. But I said it it's as long as a podcast, 5 minutes 39. But he was with
Maybe
Cooper, so they would.
Let's get him on. Let's get him on next week for an view. Did he enjoy it? Was he excited?
Okay, we'll get because what is on next week? Is it the first
loads
European
next
Grand
week?
Prix?
Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3, Imola.
First European Grand Prix of the season. Can you believe that? And we're in May, middle of May.
Not much overtake at Imola though. Just the one DRS past the pits, but it's got that dangerous kink left, hasn't it? Where did George Russell hit? Was that Bottas, wasn't it? Hit Russell. But he was going really well in his Williams out of the blue.
170 miles an hour or something, yeah.
It's that natural tendency for the guy in the middle to ease to the right, and then the bloke on the right, the road comes in, and George hit the wet tire. So it's a spectacular circuit, but one that's not designed for that much overtaking, which is a bit frustrating. So Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3 there. Formula 1 Academy have their third weekend. They've been rattling them off, haven't they? They're in Barcelona. Super Formula in Japan. Supercars in Australia.
Where in Barcelona, Tiff? Where in Barcelona? Where will it be?
The Barcelona track.
It will be
Formula 1 track.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Supercars in somewhere in Australia. NASCAR's have their Superstars weekend as well, the half-mile north Wilkesboro track. And back home, the only thing I can see of major is the British Superbikes at Donington. So you fancy a bit of live motorbike racing? Donington's the place this weekend.
Well, I have to correct you there, Tiff, because there is a bigger event than that back home, and it's a cross circuit. It's a cross circuit. Have a guess what it is? The boys are back.
What circuit?
Croft.
Oh, Croft. It's a cross. Yeah. It must be Caterham's.
Yeah, the Caterham boys are back. So I was going to go, but then I looked, I put it on Google Maps. It's like 4 and a bit hours. I can't believe that last year.
You drove there. I know you drove
there, did the race, and then drove back.
All in one day.
Bloody mad. In a bloody Caterham.
That's the spirit.
That is the spirit. And do you know what? It was my best ever race, full stop. Better than any podium. It was just,
you're not popping up there then? You're not popping up there.
I can't remember where. Then the boys are off to Zandvoort, beginning of June. So
I bet you'll go there. Night out in Amsterdam. I bet you'll go for that trip. Forget the Caterham's boys. Amsterdam for the night out.
Yeah, you know why? Bloody lucky Supercars Joe. He's going to be on it, isn't he? So, so you might have to come for that one. So thanks for joining. Let us know below. I'm really curious. What is the most famous racetrack or race town in the world? Is it Silverstone, Monte Carlo, Le Mans, Indianapolis? Let us know in the comments below. We'll put it as a pinned question. What's your answer, Tiff?
Le Mans.
Yeah.
Or Monte Carlo. But Le Mans is a proper track. Monaco's a street. Le Mans.
Okay. All right. Thanks for joining. We'll look forward to seeing you next week for an action-packed weekend of motorsport. Cheers.
Cheers.